The first antipope, John the 23rd, opened his false council at Constance in the 4th year of his reign, 1414. The recent antipope, John the 23rd, opened Vatican II in the 4th year of his reign, 1962. The first antipope, John the 23rd, ended his anti-pontificate shortly before the 3rd session of his false council of Constance. The recent antipope, John the 23rd, died shortly before the 3rd session of Vatican II, thus ending his anti-pontificate. We believe that the similarities between the first antipope, John the 23rd, and the second are not mere coincidences. The first antipope, John the 23rd, was also the last antipope to reign from Rome. Was Angelo Roncalli, the recent antipope, John the 23rd, by taking that name, indicating symbolically that he is continuing in the line of antipopes to reign from Rome? Another important point concerning Angelo Roncalli, the more recent antipope, John the 23rd, is the pastoral council myth. It is widely held that the Vatican II antipopes did not bind anyone to Vatican II, because antipope John the 23rd supposedly said in his opening speech at the council that Vatican II was only to be a pastoral council. This is not true. John the 23rd opening speech at Vatican II, October 11, 1962. The substance of the deposit of faith is one thing, and the way in which it is presented is another. And it is the latter that must be taken into great consideration with patience if necessary, everything being measured in the forms and proportions of a magisterium which is predominantly pastoral in character. Antipope John the 23rd did not say that Vatican II would be a pastoral council. He said that it would be measured according to the magisterium, which is predominantly pastoral in character. This is important because many have used this myth to say that the Vatican II antipopes did not bind anyone to Vatican II. Nevertheless, the fact that antipope John the 23rd did not actually call Vatican II a pastoral council in his opening speech does not really matter one way or another, because it was antipope Paul VI who confirmed the heresies of Vatican II, and it is his confirmation that proves that Vatican II is binding upon those who accept him. Now, some of the defenders of antipope Paul VI have argued that he did not authoritatively promulgate or confirm Vatican II. They make this argument in the hope of being able to accept him as a true pope, while rejecting his false council. These people realize that if it can be proven that Paul VI did authoritatively confirm Vatican II, they must come to the conclusion that he was an antipope. But an examination of the documents of Vatican II prove that antipope Paul VI did authoritatively confirm all of them. Each one of the 16 decrees of Vatican II begins with the following words: Paul, bishop, servant of the servants of God, together with the fathers of the sacred council, for everlasting memory. This introduction to each decree by antipope Paul VI corresponds to that of many dogmatic councils. Pope Eugene IV began the 9th session of the Dogmatic Council of Florence with these words: Eugenius, bishop, servant of the servants of God, for an everlasting record. Pope Julius II began the 3rd session of the Dogmatic Fifth Lateran Council with these words: Julius, bishop, servant of the servants of God, with the approval of the Sacred Council for an everlasting record. And Pope Pius IX began the 1st session of the Dogmatic First Vatican Council with these words: Pius, bishop, servant of the servants of God, with the approval of the Sacred Council for an everlasting record. Therefore, the words of antipope Paul VI at the beginning of every decree of Vatican II are exactly the same as the words of many real popes when issuing dogmatic decrees at councils. But that's not all. Every decree of Vatican II is finished with antipope Paul VI's signature and the following words, quote, Each and every one of the things set forth in this decree has won the consent of the fathers. We too, by the apostolic authority conferred on us by Christ, join with the venerable fathers in approving, decreeing, and establishing these things in the Holy Spirit, and we direct that what has thus been enacted in synod be published to God's glory. Rome at St. Peter's. I, Paul, Bishop of the Catholic Church, End quote. This fact absolutely crushes any idea that Antipope Paul VI was a true pope. I repeat, the way in which Antipope Paul VI closed every document of Vatican II destroys any claim that he was ever a true pope. For a true pope could never confirm or promulgate Vatican II in this authoritative manner. And if you are not convinced of this, ask yourself this question. Is it possible for a true pope to approve, decree, and establish all the heresies of Vatican II in the Holy Spirit and by his apostolic authority? Your Catholic sense tells you the answer. No way. But if Antipope Paul VI was a true pope, we have a true pope approving, decreeing, and establishing everything in Vatican II by his apostolic authority and in the Holy Spirit. This is impossible. Pope Pius IX, Vatican Council I, Session 4, Chapter 4. The Roman Pontiff, when he speaks ex cathedra, that is, when carrying out the duty of the pastor and teacher of all Christians, in accord with the supreme apostolic authority, he explains the doctrine of faith or morals to be held by the universal Church through the divine assistance promised him in Blessed Peter, operates with that infallibility with which the divine Redeemer wished that his Church be instructed in defining doctrine on faith and morals, and so such definitions of the Roman Pontiff from himself, but not from the consensus of the Church, are unalterable. But if anyone presumes to contradict this definition of ours, which may God forbid, let him be anathema. From this infallible definition of Pope Pius IX, we can see that there are three requirements that need to be met for a pope to teach infallibly. 1. The Roman Pontiff must carry out his duty of pastor and teacher of all Christians by introducing each decree of Vatican II as Paul, bishop, servant of the servants of God, together with the fathers of the Sacred Council for everlasting memory. Paul VI was definitely pretending to act as pastor and teacher of all Christians, thus fulfilling the first requirement. 2. The second requirement defined by Pius IX is that the Roman Pontiff teach in accord with the supreme apostolic authority. Antipope Paul VI invoked his apostolic authority at the end of every Vatican II document, thus fulfilling the second requirement. 3. The third requirement is that the Roman Pontiff must speak on a point of faith or morals to be believed by the universal Church. The documents of Vatican II are filled with points of faith and morals, and they must be believed if Antipope Paul VI was a pope, because he approved, decreed, and established them, ordering that they be published. Thus, the third requirement was also fulfilled by Antipope Paul VI. Therefore, if Antipope Paul VI had been a pope, everything in Vatican II dealing with faith or morals was promulgated ex cathedra, including all of its heresies. This is impossible. And anyone who would say that it is possible is a heretic. Therefore, anyone recognizing the facts that we are presenting here, who still maintains that it is possible that Antipope Paul VI was a true pope, is a heretic. Some people will erroneously argue that for a pope to speak ex cathedra, he must condemn the opposing view or set forth penalties for non-observance. This is not true. Nowhere in the definition of Pope Pius IX on papal infallibility does he say that the Pope must condemn in order to operate infallibly. There are many examples of infallible definitions where popes don't condemn or set forth any penalties. Consider, for example, the ex cathedra definition of Pope Benedict XII in 1336. Pope Benedict XII, Benedictus Deus, 1336, quote, "By this edict which will prevail forever, with apostolic authority we declare," end quote. That's all Pope Benedict XII said to invoke his infallible teaching authority. He didn't issue any condemnations, and with that one line, Pope Benedict XII met all the requirements to speak ex cathedra. The words of Antipope Paul VI at the end of every Vatican II decree are even more solemn than the words of Pope Benedict XII. Thus they would undoubtedly qualify